All right, so I'm recording this on December 26th, 2022, the day after Christmas. And 1 month ago, well, 1 month and 1 day ago, I recorded layout update number 1 for my O-scale nickel plate road east end layout. I'm gonna record update number 2 today. As you can see, since update number 1, in about a month and a day span, quite a bit has been done. So in the last update, it was just the base bench work. I filmed that on November 25th, which was the day we built all the bench work. So since in the span between this video and the last video, quite a bit's been done in the layout. So I'm just going to do a quick overview. Well, I say quick, I'm sure it'll be a lot longer than quick, but we'll do an overview of what has been added, what's been added, and what has been done to the layout since the last update. So I don't normally do any kind of script when I film these videos. I just kind of talk, and hopefully I'll remember everything that I need to talk about, because there's been a lot added and a lot, changed to the layout since the last layout update. So I'm just gonna try and go in order of what I did since the last video. So the first thing I did after that last video was that weekend I went out and bought quite a bit of Lionel Fast Track. As I mentioned in my track weathering video, I'm using Lionel Fast Track because I have a lot of Lionel Fast Track. Like I have that from growing up in previous layouts and such. I've had a lot of Lionel Fast Track, but what I was lacking in was a lot of curves. The curves here are made up really of anything between 060 and 096. I did not have a lot of those wider curves. So I had to go out to my local train store and buy a lot of curves to satisfy the track plan that I wanted on this layout. So bought all the curves I needed, and then later that weekend I became really sick. I think I had the flu. It was not fun. Do not recommend getting the flu. It was pretty terrible, but then I had to go back up to school and do a couple finals. I'm in college, so to do all my finals and stuff. But when I came back and on my winter break, I have a lot more time, and that meant a lot more time for the layout. So when I came back, I went ahead and started weathering all this track. And I'm not going to go too much. I'm not going to go into how I weather my track. You can watch my track weathering video on that. But weathered most of the track that I need. There's a few spots that are not weathered. On the main line, there's two spots here. One is this spot here. This is where there's going to be a switch here. And the other spot is over here. This is going to be a bridge, so I didn't bother weathering that. And I didn't bother weathering this. I don't want to waste my time and resources and stuff on something that's going to be taken out anyway. And then you'll notice here, this second track, this is the Penn Chautauqua branch, and not weather any of this, because I'm just going to wait till I get, this is pretty much in place, but not exactly, because I want to get the switches first and see where everything has to go. Once that's in and screwed in and whatnot, and it's all in its final position, then I'll take the track apart and I'll start weathering all this track as well as everything else I need to do. So the track is almost done, but 95% of the main line is weathered. So that's good. So after I weathered the track, what am I gonna do next to weather the track? Then I started putting in the risers to raise the track up. So you'll notice here that the track rests above the top of the base bench work here. This is the bench base work. This is what we built in my last layout update, was just the bench base work. And the track sits an additional 4 inches above the bench work here. I did this for a couple reasons. The first reason was just to model elevation, which is something that is I never see in O-scale layouts. It's very, very rarely seen on most O-scale layouts. And I really don't understand why, because when I see in a lot of O-scale layouts, especially even permanent layouts, people will build where their permanent layout in their basement or something, is they build the bench base work, then they slap plywood on top of the bench base work and they put track on it. And that's great. I mean, if that's what you want to do, go for it. But if you're modeling realism, you really shouldn't be doing that, because railroads are not, well, the earth isn't flat, even no matter if you're a flat earther or not. Terrain on the earth is not flat. It's up and down, it's hilly and such, even in the flattest of areas. Because I'm modeling northeast Ohio and western New York, and up there it is relatively flat, but there's still rolling hills. And the railroad wants to build the flattest right-of-way possible, and so what they'll do over there is they'll tend to build small fills or cuts or something across the land and cut through the land to get their main line or their right-of-way as straight and as flat as possible. And so even if you don't really notice it, if you spend time around railroad tracks and you look at pictures and such, you can see the fills, even if they're small fills or something, or there's a lot of overgrowth around the fills, but there's still fills there. And so I wanted to model that, and it's really not that hard to model. And so what I did was I raised the track up 4 inches off the table. So again, this is the bench base work. This is what was in the layout update number 1. The track is raised up. I had a whole bunch of 1x3s and plywood. So I should also state that all the plywood and 1x3s and 2x4s and everything else that you see here, or 2x3s, excuse me, 2x3s and 2x4s and all the plywood that I have, didn't have to buy any of that. I had all that from previous layouts. So that was a really nice added bonus. But so the first thing I did was I found all the 2x3s and 2x4s that I could find, and I cut them into sections. So again, the track sits 4 inches above the plywood. The 1x3s are additional, 3 inches? So from the bottom to the top of the 2x3s or 2x4s, the risers for the track, they are 5 7/8 inches, and they're screwed in with two. Where's the screws on this one? They're screwed in with just 2 screws on each one. They're screwed in to the side of the 1x3s, and then 5 7/8 inches, which means there's 4 inches from the top of the 1x3 to the bottom of the plywood, or the 3.5 inches. Sorry, so 3.5 inches from the top of the 1x3 to the bottom of the plywood. So 3.5 inches on this riser, then the plywood's 1/2 inch. So 3.5 plus half is 4 inches. So the track sits up 4 inches above the top, and it allows me to again model fills, and like over here when I have an underpass, I can model an underpass fairly easily. The road just goes straight and it goes right under the track. So that was the biggest reason why I did that. And again, you don't see that a lot in O scale. So I think hopefully that'll kind of set this layout apart and make it look a little step above a lot of other layouts of its size. So anywhere I wanted to have a town or any kind of flat area, I just used some plywood sheets. Again, all plywood I had. This is still the same 1/2 inch plywood. So this is a 2x4 sheet, I believe. Didn't have to cut it at all. Just just have a whole bunch of risers under it, but didn't have to cut anything at all. This is a 2x4 sheet. This will be where the town of Lorain, Ohio is going to be. And you'll notice the diamond here. This is the B&O diamond, but this is the town of Lorain, Ohio. So I used the plywood sheet here. And then over here, this is a larger, I think this is 2.5 by 6.5 feet, if I'm not mistaken. This is actually 2 plywood sheets, just cut in half, and then they're cut and then they fit correctly. So this is for Brockton, New York. So yeah, put the plywood in over here, and then everywhere else is just plywood that was cut with a jig. So it was just cut to follow the contour of the track. Just trace the track out, and then put it on the risers here, and that was that. And this track here, this is just a temporary bridge where the actual lift bridge will go once I get that. I'm going to order it tomorrow at the time of this video, so I'll order it tomorrow. It should be here by maybe hopefully early next week, but this is temporary. So one thing that I learned, this is my first layout I've ever built, really a permanent layout I've ever built, and obviously you make mistakes and you learn from mistakes. And one of the biggest mistakes that I did was tracing out and then cutting with the jigsaw on the plywood ribbon here, especially on the curves. Now I didn't cut this; my brother cut this, so thanks, Jonathan. But anyway, I didn't trace this out, or I should take that back. I designed all this track in SCARM, which is a great online digital track planning resource, or whatever. And I had all the curves I needed. It draws it out perfectly. So these curves are made up of not one singular curve. So like this curve, it's 6.5 feet wide, the table. This curve is not all 072 all the way around. For example, it has like some 096 over here, 072, a piece of 060 in the middle, and then 084, and so on and so forth. It's like made up of like 50 different radiuses. So when I was designing this track plan, I thought I knew what I needed, or I knew what I needed in the order that I needed to make the correct curves. And when I initially made these curves, I did follow that path. But somewhere along the way, I was taking track apart to weather it and such, and I was taking it apart and putting it back together, and the order did get screwed up a little bit. So whenever we went to go trace on the plywood to cut these out, they were not the exactly correct curves that I needed, or the exact radius and varying radiuses of the curves I needed. So when I went to go take the track apart and put it all back together in the correct order, it didn't quite fit the way I wanted it to. So you'll notice here, like if I follow the inside, you see there's a lot of room between the edge of the plywood and the edge of the track here. Then you work your way around, and you see it kind of narrows out here. Over here, there's not quite as much, it gets really narrow. Then there's more room over here, and then you can look on the back side, you see it's almost off the plywood on this side. So that was one mistake, and we did debate just, ripping this all out and throwing it away and trying it again with the correct size curve radiuses, curve tracing, and wider cuts. But we made it work, and honestly, I'm okay with that, because like over here, and I'll get to this more in a second, where I'm adding scenery, like you can't even tell it's the right radius. Once it's all scenic and covered with plaster and there's more over here, you won't even tell. So, lesson learned, to make sure that I double check all my, I do all this planning, I don't even really follow it. So Definitely need to double check that stuff next time if I, if I ever build another layout, which I'm sure I will at some point. But that was definitely a mistake. That I, you can learn from your mistakes, and now I know for next time to do it right. So as I mentioned before, I'm using Lionel Fast Track on this layout, and as I touched on just a second ago, the curves are all varying radiuses. And I did this because, yes, I'm using Lionel Fast Track, but I wanted to give the impression, I wanted to give the impression that it was not Lionel Fast Track in as many ways as possible. So one way of doing this was obviously with the varying radius curves. Like I tried to have the widest curves that I could possibly have. So like I know on this curve, for example, as you approach it, it's 096. There's a little bit of 084 and 072, and then right about here, it goes to 060. So it's a tighter 060 curve coming out, and then there's an 096 curve right here that leads it out onto the bridge. And I like this approach a lot better because it makes it not appear like sectional track as much as possible. Having these nice wide, broad approaches to curves, like even here where it's 060, but there's an 096 approach. So if you look at it around the corner, it doesn't quite look as tight. So that helps a lot. And again, this is something that I see in a lot of other O-scale layouts. They have these really nice wide curves, or they have these really nice wide tables, but then they use like 060 with straight tracks in the middle. So it's like 060, then it straightens out and it's 060 again, or something like that. And I don't like that. Like I took a lot of care in designing this track plan to accommodate the widest curves that I possibly could. And I think it works out. And I think my intensive planning worked out. Like, you can see over here where I have, this is the train here sitting on, I believe, an 072 curve, but it kind of looks a lot wider than that because I have the 096 approach and the 084 approach coming into the 072 curve. And I think even just ahead of the engine over there is 072 or 060, excuse me. But, I think it really, it's a really good design. And if you take the care and especially use the digital track planning programs, it makes it really easy to play around with different things before you go out and buy all this track and kind of trial and error it, in person or in reality, spending all that money and such. So it helped a lot because I was able to design the curves exactly as I wanted to, and then when it was time to go buy all these curves, I knew exactly what I needed. So like I knew it actually generates the amount of curve needed for the layout. So like I knew I needed, for example, like 11 072 curves or something. So I knew what to buy and overbuy or underbuy or anything. So that was a great. SCARM's a great resource, and any kind of digital track planning is a great resource for doing your track planning, and especially for getting the track plan that I did. Like, I could not be happier with the track plan that I have. And of course, the nice wide curves were only complemented by the super elevation I did. Super elevation is one of my favorite things to do in this hobby. And again, something that I've seen done more recently, to give it credit, but something that has not been done enough on a lot of other layouts. Super elevation is one of the easiest things you can do and one of the best things you can do. Every single curve on here is super elevated, so like all the big wide curves are, and even including like the little S curves here and over here. Everything here is super elevated, and it just looks so much better. I mean, like I said, this curve here is 060, and it is a fairly tight curve, all things considered. But the super elevation honestly helps it so much. It makes it look just so much better. So I did my super elevation very simple. I just used N-scale cork roadbed, and I got this at one of my local hobby shops for like very cheap. I think I paid, for all the cork roadbed that I have, when I have a decent amount of it, I paid maybe less than $5 for all of it. But it's cork roadbed, and I took a little bit of white glue, and I glued it in place, following the track contour, and then I laid the track on top of it, and then I screwed in the far side of the track here with some screws. And that kind of helped the stress in, or that kind of helped it force it down so it is banked a little bit. You can see it's banked here. And then if needed, like over here, I didn't put any on that side, but you can see over there, the little white things. That's just a little bit of styrene that I had. You could use whatever, you could use styrene or cardboard or something to make shims. And that helps the track remain smooth through the curve. Because something that I see a lot on, or something that is just, that can happen when using sectional track and super elevating is in between the curve, in the track pieces, the track can kind of can go like up and it can kind of bounce. So I put shims in under the joints, particularly under the joints, so the track remained relatively smooth. It's about as smooth as I can get it. The engine still bounce up and down a little bit, but it's definitely a lot better than how it would have been if I didn't put any kind of shims in. And again, I super elevated everywhere, so you'll see even like a couple of the cars and roll this train through. You can see here, as the train comes through, you see it super elevates coming out of this curve, then it straightens out, or it flattens out briefly, coming underneath, like going over the diamond with the B&O. You can even see here, it super elevates again, coming around this curve. So super elevation, again, I think is one of the easiest and best things you can do. There's a couple different approaches to it. I decided to use the cork approach, but I'm sure you could try something different. You can look through a couple different, you know, go online and you can find a couple different resources. There's many different things that you can use, but this is what I did, and I could not be happier with it. Like honestly, the super elevation is one of my favorite parts of the track, and just watching the trains run, especially if you stand like over in this back corner here and watch the train come around the curve, go past where the birch are sitting on that, you know, coming through that S curve, and then come through here. It just looks so cool when it super elevates. So that is something that, again, I can't recommend enough that you would do in your layout if you're designing a layout, or even if you already have a layout, like with Fast Trick or something. Look into super elevating your track. It's not hard to do, and it's totally worth it. So after doing all the super elevation and track work and getting trains running and the whole 9 yards there, I decided to start on some scenery. So this is the Lake Erie scene. In the last video, I talked about kind of my ideas for this scene. Like I knew I wanted to have the lake represented in some fashion. My two options were doing a lakeshore scene or doing a causeway scene, which is, you know, inspired off of the New York Central Main there, near in the Sandusky Bay. I decided to go with the lakeshore scene for two reasons. The first reason is because it's accurate to nickel plate. They ran along the lake here and along the lake shore. There was no causeway. But the bigger reason was because once I put the Chautauqua branch in over here, I thought it would look too cluttered and it would look almost more like a swamp than a bay, because the bay can only come to about, well, the edge of the table here. Then it really couldn't go any further this way because this track was here, and I thought two bridges and such, it would not look right. So I decided to instead model just the lakeshore scene. I'll have probably a road coming out like it was there in real life. A road parallels the tracks and will come up and cross over. I don't know, something like that. But to do the lakeshore here is the cardboard lattice method. I'm not going to really talk about how I did the cardboard lattice method. It's a pretty standard. It's a pretty standard design. You know, it's a pretty standard scenery technique that you see a lot in different model railroad layouts. But cardboard lattice here, you notice I did it pretty close together though. I think a lot of people do it a little bit further apart. I prefer to do it closer together as it's more sturdy. And once you put the plaster cloth and plaster over it, it'll just look smoother, I think. So I did the cardboard lattice over here for the lakeshore, and I'll have water sitting in Lake Erie, which again, you'll notice Lake Erie is it's on a plywood sheet that's mounted up just a little bit above the top of the table by about, I want to say it's just an inch or two above the top of the plywood, or the top of the 1x3 benchwork, the frame. And then, so it sits a little bit closer to the tracks. I think down here it would be too low below the track. So this is a little bit of a better distance. And the other spot where I did all the cardboard lattice, I'm sure you've noticed earlier in the video, was over here. And this is actually the result of a change in my layout plans and some scenes I want to do. So this is a result of deleting the New York Central overpass in Vermilion. And again, I talked about that in my first video, first layout update. So I had to lose the casualty here was the New York Central overpass scene, but I was able to gain another scene that's going to be over in this back corner over here. And that's going to be, I'm going to model Blasdell, New York, which is where the Penty Chautauqua branch and the joint nickel plate main line ended as you went eastbound. So it started over here at Brockton, and it ran 50 miles, which I've represented all 50 miles in perfect, no compression at all, to Blasdell, New York here. And I'll model Blasdell. They had a tower here, GB Tower, and they had a Penty signal bridge, and they had a lot more here. They had a diamond with the Erie Lackawanna and a whole bunch of stuff. Don't have room for any of that, but I will model the Penty signal bridge and of course the tower. But I thought it would get too cluttered, as you go from Blasdell to Brockton and then over to the New York Central overpass in this corner. Like there would just be too much going on, too much track. So I decided to lose the New York Central overpass because I wasn't too attached to it. It was like, whatever. And more importantly, for Christmas, I got home with the nickel plate books because, research. And there's a picture in there of a nickel plate berth coming under like an old wooden arch bridge, like the Rainbow Arch, where it kind of goes up and it goes straight and then comes back down the other side, in a place called Avery, Ohio, which is outside of Bellevue. So I decided to model that scene. So again here, you'll notice some more of my borderline cardboard lattice work. Again, very close together. It took me a couple hours to do this, but worth it. I think it's gonna look good once the plaster and the plaster cloth and I put the sculpted mold or plaster, whatever I end up doing, over top of it. So I did this side and I just put some rough cardboard in here just to have it something to connect to, and I kind of followed an outline for how I want the land to go. I'll eventually put actual hardboard and a nice fascia over top of this, so don't mind. You see, it's an old shipping container or shipping carton all cut up or whatever. But so this side is done for the most part, and then I'll do this side probably tomorrow or for the next few weeks, next few days or whatever. But you see, I very roughly have the cardboard in. I'm gonna put some other more cardboard in here, so it's not quite as steep of a hill, but it's a work in progress. I think it's more fun to have trains running even on a very roughly, it's more fun to have trains running on something that resembles a hill or resembles scenery than just a plywood frame. I've been enjoying running trains a lot more, even though it's just a simple loop. I've been enjoying the trains a lot more, having them run past this in the lake scene than just a bunch of bare plywood. So this is a work in progress. I'm very excited to continue progress on this and share more updates as I keep chipping away at this side of the layout. So another change that that's another change you could say that I'm working on with the layout is going to be here in Brockton. So I modified, again, this is very temporary. I don't have any of the switches yet, but I'll get the switches pretty soon. But I'm still kind of figuring out what I want to do in Brockton, because I have this big open scene here, and I don't really have any towns really of any kind of big interest in this layout. It's a lot of just farmland, and of course I have the bridge and the lakeshore scene and stuff. I wanted to have something a little bit more attention grabbing. And in Brockton, the Pensy came off of the nickel plate. The joint main line ended here going westbound. The Pensy turned south and went down to Corey, Pennsylvania, and down towards Oil City, PA, and such. But here at Brockton, they did have a small engine facility here for helpers that were going southbound, because there was a grade coming southbound on the Chautauqua branch. So I decided, I think I'm going to model something here, a representation of that engine terminal. I might have maybe like a little coaling area, maybe a water tower and such. I'm going to put that over in this area. I don't have a ton of room here, but I have enough to make something work. So that'll just kind of give a little more interest to Brockton. So the only unfortunate thing is I need to spend a little more money to get another switch to accommodate the plan that I'm thinking of. But it is what it is. I think it's gonna it'll add just a little bit more interest to this area, because as it stands, there isn't too much. So that'll be another fun little thing to share some progress on in the future. All right, so I'll finish off this video just talking about some new things that I've gotten recently and some new projects I'm working on. I'm doing some weathering and stuff, so I had some time for that. Even the layout's taking up quite a bit of my time as far as for model trains and such recently. But this is kind of my haul from today. The day after Christmas, I went out to some local hobby shops near me and treated myself a little bit. But this first thing I got here is this Atlas O Shaney and elevated gate tower kit. These are pretty hard to find, I think, these old Atlas kits, to my knowledge. I'm not really sure, but either way, I was pretty happy to find this, because there was something just like this, a tower and these little shanties all around the nickel plate system. There's a picture of a nickel plate train coming through Brockton in 1957, I believe, and they have a tower looking just like this and a shanty looking just like that at the crossing here in Brockton. So this kit will be great, because I'll put that right in this area. And I think it'll look pretty nice. I mean, it's a pretty good stand-in for what was actually there. I think the tower was a little bit different design, but if it's painted up in nickel plate colors and such, I think it'll be just fine. So I got that. I was pretty excited to find that. I also got, not quite as exciting, with these little Woodland Scenics blends. I got green blend, earth, and burnt grass. You can't really tell the color variation because it's dark in here, but these will be good when I start doing scenery. This thing was pretty cool to find. I don't know who made this. Apparently it's made by Lifelike, I think, Walters maybe, but found this at one of my local hobby shops. It's pretty cool to find this. It's just a little kit, has all kind of stuff in here. I have the stuff I took some of it out to look at it, but it has these little dwarf signals, which are accurate GRS style dwarf signals the nickel plate actually used, and they light up too. I tested them, they actually work. So I will definitely be putting these in a few areas in the layout. Came with 2 of them and they both work, so that's pretty cool. Has this little, looks like a relay cabin kit. A few signs down here, and also came with these little crossbows I just haphazardly placed over here in Brockton just to get an idea of where that will be. I got these nice little crossbucks, but this whole kit only cost $15. That includes the 2 lighted signals, so like, good deal. I don't know how old it is, but I'm gonna guess maybe the 80s, 90s, 70s, but whatever. There's no, it says Lion American Flyer marks. I don't know when this is from, but either way, it's pretty cool to find, especially these lighted dwarfs, and they're actually accurate GRS dwarfs, which is the nickel plate uses a lot of GRS and US and S signals, so really happy to have these. This is a really cool little find. Over here is definitely my favorite thing that I found today. At the same store I found this stuff at. This is a custom signals crossing signals kit. Custom Signals, I think, makes the best signals. They make crossing signals and wayside signals and such, all that stuff. They're actually going out of business. I think they're still selling off some of their inventory, but what a great company this is. It's a really shame. It's a really shame they're going out of business because these are really awesome crossing signals. I mean, they even have like a little texture on the lenses for the crossing, where the red lights are. And they have came with a circuit board, 2 crossing flashers, and then a whole bunch of other stuff, signs and instructions on how to make it work. Works with insulated rail. But I was so excited to find these. This is such a cool find. I'll probably put these here right at the crossing. I'm gonna put a crossing here in the rain, right about here. So I'll put these right here. I'm really excited to get scenery done in this area, so I can just put these signals up, these crossing signals up, because they're gonna look so cool, and they're such a nice find. Like I couldn't be happier to find these. So I think they're still in stock at Custom Signals, but to find one just by chance on the shelf at the local hobby store, that was great. So I'm really excited to put these on. I've been busy trying to collect a bunch of reefer cars and just a bunch of steam era cars in general, but especially reefer cars. And so I've been fortunate now. I have, I think, 6. The stuff in front of it, but I think I have 6 reefer cars. I added that today with this Lionel reefer car. I think this is one of the Vision line cars, not a sound car or anything, but picked it up from my local hobby shop. It's pretty nice. I've been looking for some of these Santa Fe and just these steel orange ones, because right now I have this K-line Monon car, but the rest of them are all MTH Premier wood reefers. And they're nice. I mean, they're actually really nice cars, but I didn't want to get some steel ones. But I have been practicing some freight car weathering on these cars. I've never weathered a car before. It's funny. I'm not afraid to weather engines at all, but I've never really had a reason to weather cars. I've never really cared enough to weather cars, but I figure with this nice layout and weathered track and such, I should weather some cars. So I played around with some different techniques in these MTH Premier wood-sided reefers. I found a technique I'm pretty happy with, so I weathered all 4 of them. I use a technique of a black wash and then a little bit of weathering powder and such, but I think they look really good. I like this car especially. I did this car it's called ventilation mode apparently, where they would haul things like lettuce and onions, and they would actually leave there's no ice in here. They leave the vents open and just let the air from the train moving kind of keep everything cool. So I weathered this one with the vents open. I'll probably have a couple other cars that as I get more cars, I'll weather a few more with in ventilation mode, they called it. But I think these look pretty good. And they complement, like I said, they complement the weathered track and of course the weathered engines. Everything just looks way better. So I still have to weather these 2 steel-sided reefers as well as the caboose, but I'll get to that eventually. But that's some of my weathering projects I've been working on. But I think everything's looking pretty good. My intent here is I have everything weathered by the end, and even the small things like these wayside signals and the crossing flashers. Everything's gonna be weathered at some point or eventually. So started chipping away with that as I can. Now I didn't get any physical model trains for Christmas, and I'm okay with that. I did get a lot of things for the layout. As I mentioned before, I got a ton of books and DVDs on the nickel plate, and I love doing research. I did a lot of research on this. I will always do research on what I'm doing, when I'm modeling, because I think that's the best way, obviously, to understand what you're modeling and how the railroad operated things and such. So I got a lot of books and nickel plate research material, which is great. But I did get these cars from my brother. These are, I don't know who makes these, but they're nice cars. They're 1/43rd scale apparently, because I guess nobody makes true 1/48 scale cars. So they're 1/43rd scale, which means they're slightly bigger, I believe. I think. But either way, I don't care. They're pretty close, and I think most O scale cars that you'll find will be 1/43rd scale. But he got me 3 of them. We got a '57 Chevy, a 1950 pickup, and what's this? A '56 Ford Thunderbird. These will be nice. I think they're going to look really good. I told him in getting these cars for me, nothing past 1958, because I'm modeling 1957. But I think these look really good. And of course, like I said, I'll weather these too eventually, to some extent. And once I get roads down and I get a little more scenery done, these will look right at home. Driving through the rain or crossing under the tracks over there at Harbor Creek, or crossing the tracks at Brockton, or over the bridge over there at Avery. But somewhere, it's going to look really good. So thanks, Adam. And another very exciting addition to the layout is my other brother's Christmas gift for me. This is actually, well, you can see it's a work in progress. It's a 3D, he designed and is currently 3D printing me a model of BM Towers. This is in Brockton. This is the actual tower that was in Brockton. He's very talented in CAD, or I don't know, whatever the design program is to design this based entirely off of pictures. There's no architectural drawing of this that I could find, so I showed him a couple pictures, and he was able to build, design something just based off of the pictures. So this is the first rough test print. You can see some of the walls here screwed up. You can see over here, and over here it's a little bit frayed, but that's what he's doing now. Is his 3D printer is currently going away tonight, working at this. It only has 4 hours, 3 hours, and almost 4 hours left of printing, and that's just for the walls. Then we'll do the roof and everything else. But it's pretty cool. 3D printing, I mean, I wish I knew how to design this stuff, because I don't, but 3D printing is such a great resource for modeling and stuff, because, oh, it collapsed, but again, this is still a rough print, so don't see this as the final work. I'm sure I'll do a whole video on this later once it's done and I paint it and whatever, but 3D printing is such a great resource for this kind of stuff, because you know, nobody makes a BM tower kit. Nobody in Osaka really makes a tower that makes a building that even kind of resembles BM tower. So 3D printing is a great resource if you know, to design this stuff and really make whatever you want. As I mentioned before in some of my other modeling videos, throughout a lot of my engines have 3D printed parts in them. This is the first 3D printed structure that I've had and he's ever printed. So hopefully he'll do me some more if he's feeling generous enough to print me some more things for this layout. But really excited to get that BM tower in eventually, but those are some of my new additions on the layout. So that's about it for layout update number 2. As you can see, I've done quite a bit to the layout. A lot has happened. There's still a lot that will be happening. That's a lot that's still going on. You know, a layout building is a never-ending process, and I've really enjoyed working on this layout. Like, I have a lot of fun coming down here and, you know, chipping away at projects. You know, as I mentioned before, especially in my track weather video, I've talked about that I'm not necessarily impatient when it comes to building a layout. Like, I like to take my time, and you know, like this lattice over here took me a couple hours to do, but I'm okay with that. And the track weathering took 2 weeks to do, but you know, I think in the end it's going to make the layout just look so much better, and it's not worth rushing it, because I think I'll just be unhappy with it, even if, you know, if I have everything complete, quote unquote complete, in a quicker time. So I'm okay. You know, I got trains running, and you know, scenery's ongoing, and I'm sure, you know, I'll keep working on it as the time goes on. So I'm excited to share some more. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.